That leaf blower is bugging me. About the time I get the camera ready, he cranks it up, goes to running at full blast. I'm live from Renaissance Park, which is on the west side of the Market Street Bridge. Market Street Bridge is kind of like the line of demarcation, and it separates Renaissance Park from Coolidge Park in downtown Chattanooga. I've got a little spot over here where I can set up. I've got this beautiful bent out of shape sweet gum tree limb. I'm pretty sure, yeah. Oh, it's a maple. It's a maple tree. But some kids climbed it and broke the limb, so that's my backdrop for the day. A lot of new photographers come into the hobby. Their first foray into interchangeable lenses for their camera has to be with zooms. They come in the kit packaged with the camera, and it's just typical of the manufacturer to ship it that way. You normally get the 18 to 55 or 16 to 55 kit lens with your camera, and it gives the budding photographer, you know, some options out of the shoot. It doesn't tie them down, so to speak, to just a specific focal length. Well, after they've been a photographer for a little while, they tend to want to experiment a little more, and they want to learn, what is it with all these prime lenses everybody's talking about? That's what I want to discuss today. Give you a primer on prime lenses, so to speak. Biggest thing that I really like about prime lenses is that they come in like a very small package. I'll set this bigger one down for a minute. And typically have very large apertures comparatively to zooms. This is a 24 millimeter f2.8 aperture. That's a pretty big aperture for a 24 millimeter to fit in a package that big. You know, you take away the lens caps, you can see it's a tiny little lens. Most of the time they're small. This is my 105 f2, 105 millimeter f2 aperture. That's a big aperture for a 105 millimeter lens. It allows them to design the lenses more efficiently and with better optical performance because there's less moving parts. When you remove the zoom mechanism from a lens and you make the lens element static other than the focus section, then you're able to make the lens perform better. That's another big benefit to having primes over zooms, is they typically have better optical performance than a zoom. Another thing you'll learn to do with a prime lens that normally you don't with a zoom is you learn to compose by positioning yourself in the scene. With a 28 millimeter, such as this Canon 28 mil here, you have to get closer if you want the subject to be bigger or fill more of the frame. It just stands to reason, right? Well, with a zoom, you just rack the zoom out until they fill the frame like you want. Now what happens is that changes a lot of things in the photo. As you zoom in closer to fill the frame, you're changing the compression of the image and you're changing the field of view. The zoom, you're sort of not really learning how to build a composition. You're just kind of forcing the composition to happen, if that makes sense. Is it bad? No. There's a time and a place for a zoom lens. Lots of working professionals use zoom lenses to great effect, especially like wedding photographers, and it allows them to statically kind of position the camera and to take in things all around them at different focal lengths and still get the frame filled like they want or get specific things that they're looking for, and they don't have to like run all over the place. If you're shooting a venue such as a wedding reception, you don't have time to move around in that area, so you need that 24 to 70 2.8 lens and a flash bouncing off the ceiling so you can just point and fire. The sun's gonna run my. Another thing that a prime lens does that the zoom lens doesn't do is it teaches you to build composition by moving around in the scene. A lot of times people with zoom lenses will just stand static and they'll rack the zoom back and forth to get their composition. And while this technically works, what you're also doing when you're zooming into that person is you're actually, now let me say that one more time. Yeah, I can't, dang it. Another thing the zoom lens does is it teaches you to move around in the scene. Just like this bridge is suddenly moving just as soon as I stepped on it and got in the shade. Take two. What the person using the zoom fails to understand a lot of times, especially if they're new. When you're a veteran, you've learned this, and All the veterans that use zooms professionally, they get this, but new people don't. When you move around in the scene, the composition changes. You actually get different photos every time you reposition. So that's a perk that people don't realize. Something else that the new photographer doesn't realize about a zoom lens over a prime is that when you use a prime a while, you start to kind of see in that focal length, if that makes sense. You'll hear street photographers talk about how they can see the scenes unfolding. Even though they're not looking through the viewfinder, they kind of know what the picture's going to be because they shoot exclusively with a 28 or exclusively with a 35 or a 50 or whatever. They've used that same focal length enough, they know what it's going to look like. Having that level of an intimacy with the equipment allows you to actually become one with the camera. As they say, you know, it's to use a cliche, basically the photos start to come easier and you start to see compositions. You can get better and more powerful images, if that's the right phrasing. It just gets funnier and funnier. I've come to the park for a nice quiet place to film this video. This has to be the loudest park I have ever shot a YouTube video in. Oh Lord, it's like I cannot catch a break today here. That's been my primer on prime lenses. I want you to understand a few things about it. I'm not going to recap it. Honestly, if you shoot DX or crop sensor, get the 35 f1.8. If you shoot full frame, get the 50 f1.8. And the reason I say the 1.8s is because those are the largest aperture, most budget-friendly lenses that most camera makers make. You'll actually see like the Nikon 50mm f1.8, their nifty 50 is literally like $180 brand new, or $140. It's super economical. Until next time, this is David, the Georgia photographer, and I appreciate you watching. If you haven't done it, hit the subscribe button. I'd appreciate that. Don't really do much for the algorithm anymore from what I understand, but it makes me feel better. So, you know, I'd like that. And a thumbs up would be cool. Get your camera out and go take a picture with it, all right? We'll see you later. Bye-bye. So he wants to get as many good photos as he can, so he shoots the zooms. It just makes sense. It's a tool. Okay, he's running the leaf blower again, full blast.